Buon pomeriggio.
So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the 43rd edition of the Rimini meeting entitled Young People for a New Economy from the Economy of St. Francis. As you probably know, 2 years ago, Pope Francis invited young economists, academics and entrepreneurs to meet and talk about topics and about how to relaunch the economy. I would like to quote the Pope, who said that we need to opt for an economy that humanizes, that takes care of the created world. Therefore, about 2,000 young people from all over the world brought together a process which is that of the economy of St. Francis, inspired by the namesake Pope, by the same name saint of Assisi. This event was postponed. It was originally scheduled for 2020, but due to the pandemic, it was postponed. A number of challenges brought together young people from all over the world, from Indonesia to the Philippines to Europe. And this within the framework of a rigorous process that led to the last November event. For 3 days, young people met together and they worked and discussed on several proposals for this change, for the change that, in the words of the Pope, has to be targeted to the development of the whole world. So we're talking about young people who had the courage to say "I," as the title of this year's meeting says. So this meeting basically stems from my personal desire, my personal wish, together with other young people of the Foundation for Subsidiarity in the Rimini meeting, to tell what has happened in these 1.5 years, in which actually many things happened. And we've all been involved in this economy of St. Francis. And so we've witnessed these events. And on the other hand, we were inspired by the wish to address a number of issues which, in our opinion, were particularly urgent, based on the words of the Pope, to reply and to give our contribution. So we invited Luigino Bruni, a professor at LUMSA in Rome, journalist for Avvenire, and the director of the journal The Economy of St. Francis. We invited him in order for us to have the chance that he discusses with young people who most actively contributed to the activities of the Economy of St. Francis this year. Before launching the debate, I would like to give you a first suggestion that refers to my personal experience as a researcher. I am a research fellow and professor at the Università Cattolica in Milan, and my task is basically to focus and to investigate companies which have a so to say, social mission, especially in Africa. Ever since the encyclical of the Pope, which I have the chance to read, I've been moved by the wish to, in a way, reply positively to this mission, to this goal. So I put myself at stake, and I had the chance to meet Luigino Bruni and to focus on the economies in transition. We worked a lot with about 200 people who actively worked with me, and we highlighted a lot of entrepreneurial and research projects which are definitely internationally relevant. For example, there has been a special edition that we developed together with young researchers on this model of the economy of St. Francis, so that this model becomes internationally relevant for the world. There is an important scientific journal that has declared itself interested in this research, and some contribution of the young people will be published in this journal. Another interesting initiative was the meeting with lawyer Robert Billett. With him, we talked about environmental issues. Robert Billett has worked for 20 years within the framework of an important legal action against a chemical multinational. The issue here was basically the very same responsibility, the very same accountability that Pope Francis has called us for. So in a variety of ways, we've tried to provide an answer to the appeal that Pope Francis has launched. Pope Francis basically told us that we cannot be outside from from those areas in which the present and the future is generated. We have to be involved. And he even said that it is urgent to find answers, but at the same time it is indispensable to train leading classes who are capable to spread culture, enlarge and widen horizons, and create forms of belonging. So we are here, and I'm talking also on behalf of the young people who are connected from home and those who are here. And we are here because we feel this urgency of contributing to build the future and not to be, in a way, overwhelmed by it, especially in pandemic and post-pandemic periods. And this is a wish that I would like to express also to all those who are here with us today. So here at the meeting today, we would like to actually follow this path. We would like to listen to interesting contributions in this respect, and we would also like to delve a little bit more when it comes to what has happened this year. So, Professor Bruni, what have you witnessed in terms of ongoing changes? First of all, thanks, Giacomo. Thanks to you all. Thanks to the young people and to all those who are following us from home and from here. And also thanks to the Rimini meeting for their kind invitation in this very important meeting. I came here 2 years ago, soon after the publication of the letter of the Pope in May 2019, and the following August we were here to present the event, and actually we did not know that actually the pandemic was probably at its very inception back then, a pandemic that would later on make life complicated for the whole of the world. As there was I would like to quote, to make reference here to the words uttered by the famous Italian poet Giacomo Leopardi, who in a famous poem talked about a fence, and actually imagining what's beyond that fence has made it possible for us to imagine unimaginable things. So we could have not imagined that that we would have such a large movement of young people from all over the world. I'm an observer, I'm a humble observer here, and I observe that there is an ongoing process, and also Pope Francis is a master here. One of his first sentences was that we should not occupy places or spaces, but rather activate processes. And actually, whenever you have young people involved in something, well, that's a process per se, because they are naturally projected into the future. So this reality is something that belongs to young people, and it cannot be controlled. There cannot be any masters. Everybody has to feel as the protagonist, as the center and the periphery of these processes. So hundreds of activities have been put in place in this period. Some of them are really extraordinary. For example, in Italy, there has been a day against gambling that was organized on the 10th of July. Young people actually declared themselves against gambling, and there was a very clear, transparent stance. Very recently, they launched the initiative of a march in favor of Afghan women. So a typical thing of young people is that they're very quick. Adults actually study phenomena, and then we start, but only 1 year later. Basically, they study the phenomena while young people study a phenomena and start immediately. So on the 28th of August, there will be a march with a blue drapery. Blue is the traditional color of the Afghan burqa. And there will be a march of young people, especially young girls, simply to say that we are supporting the young Afghan women. That's a huge problem, we all know. And then, what strikes me most is the fact that I witness young people as protagonists. These are actually times in which young people are protagonists. This is the new, so to say, 1968 of mankind. While in the last century the church was the enemy to fight against, in this new moment of change, the Church of St. Francis is at the very core of this process of change. And here, young people have a new responsibility, and we have to listen to them. When it comes to the environment and the economy, we have very little to teach them, because we as adults have made lots of damages. So young people have to start from scratch, and we as adults have to be capable of listening to them and highlight their ideas and their activities. Thank you very much, Professor. One of the issues that we were particularly struck about when listening to the Pope was this issue of connection. Everything is connected. Pope Francis said in his letter that today, more than ever, everything is deeply interwoven, and the safeguard of the environment cannot be disconnected from justice for the poor and the solution of the structural problems of the world economy. So, Luca, I would like you to tell us something about this and about what it means, connection. Luca Farè is a PhD student at the Namur University. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Good morning to those who are here and those who are following us from above. I participated in the Assisi virtual event of the Economy of St. Francis, and this pathway is leaving us with lots of remarks and food for thought. One of them is the very fact that the Pope Francis stressed the fact that everything is deeply interconnected. So when faced with the big challenges we have to face about, for example, economic, digital, energy and ecological transition, when facing these issues, we have to have a holistic approach. We cannot have a sectorial stance. I am a researcher, and I've noticed that the continuous specialization of the economy, and not only of the economy, of course I'm talking about the economy because that's my field of work, but this increasing specialization prevents us to understand this interconnectedness, because everything is seen as something that is really sectorial. It is as if we were to renounce this kind of global, comprehensive view if we specialize too much. With the Economy of St. Francis, we made a very interesting attempt. We tried to answer this question. We envisaged a working method. Working groups were set up, and each of them focused on a specific topic. So basically, we did not renounce the possibility for us to delve into the details of the issues. A large number of young people were involved, coming from all over the world, and this made it possible for us to, in a way, provide for pluralism in ideas and faiths. And we also created moments in which we could benefit from the different point of view of the other. We created the so-called proximity groups to favor local development, starting from the values of the Economy of St. Francis. So I believe this has been a very interesting attempt to answer the words of the Pope. Another interesting message that emerged clearly is that an economic problem cannot be solved only with economic solutions. For example, Einaudi once said that an economic problem is the aspect and the consequence of a spiritual, of a much wider, much more far-reaching spiritual and moral problem. So my experience stems from my personal experience as a researcher and from what I've seen in this pathway. In other words, I wondered what can help us increase and enhance our awareness, especially given the historical period in which we live, where we're called upon to provide for this economic growth. Well, we come from the 20th century. I was born in the 20th century, and I was trained in the 20th century. That was a century in which the buzzword separation, not so much because science actually made a choice. Science decided to separate in order to go deeper. So we took the real world, we divided it into slices, and according to the great economist Pareto, we then basically went into the details and went deep into each individual pieces, and in the hope that someone would one day bring all the pieces together. This probably led to a very fragmented training and knowledge in young people. So in other words, this century was a century that divided more than united people. So today's young economist that attends a school for economics basically is trained on just a bit of reality. So this means that we have the task of completely envisage again the curricula. It is meaningless that, for example, if you are 20 years ago, when you reach 30 years of age, you have forgotten basically what you've learned before. In other words, we have to make sure that, for example, BA courses are focused on the training of one's own character. For example, public law, or the study of the Italian Constitution. This is something that has disappeared in order to understand the complexity of thoughts and how the problems of our time are born. And then in the MA, you get specialized. So we need to seriously rethink the way we train our young people. So this is a huge message, the big message. It is not possible to read the ecology without the economy and the ecology without the economy. So the cry of the poor people and the cry of the earth are the same cry. So this means that we have to completely review our way of thinking. And then when it comes to Italian politics, of course, we can have a ministry for the ecological transition, and we can have a ministry for the economy in which we have, for example, someone who's, for example, expert in finance. But we have economics done with the finance person of the Bank of Italy. The symbolic vision would be to have, for example, an ecological economist in charge of the Ministry for the Economy. Because otherwise, if you do economic policies following your financial stances and then have it sided by an ecologist in charge of transition, we continue going on as we did in the 20th century. So this is, again, the logic of separation. So I believe that young people, you have to say this loud and clear, louder and clearer, not so much to me, but rather to politicians, to those who are in charge of this. So we need to be more present in the public debate. It is no longer the time in which young people actually study and do no longer talk. Actually, today, young people talk like adults. And as a matter of fact, same dignity and same importance.
Grazie, molto affascinante questo tema.
So this theme of connection is really fascinating. If on the one hand, this aspect in the economy of Francis has always been a focal point, because we have always tried to connect young people with different problems, different issues, different backgrounds from different regions of the world. On the other hand, what we have witnessed is a phenomenon that has involved so many different eyes, so many different people that were acting for a common goal. So I was reading a few days ago something that Saint Catherine from Siena said in the 14th century. She said, We need to work for the common good, not for the good of the individual. So this is something that is at the very heart of what we do in the economy of Francis. We work in villages. We call them villages. This is to say, these are some areas that are linked to different aspects of economy, enterprises, jobs, and so on and so forth. So we have now the representative of the University of Cattolica in Milan, and he will talk about work and care. Thank you, Giacomo. Thanks for the invitation. And well, yes, work and care. This is the village I have been working at in the last 2 years, and I have been doing this with great enthusiasm and great interest, because care is something that concerns all of us. It concerns me for my personal reasons, because of my family, but also because of my profession. I am an economist, and I can say that I am, quite an open-minded economist, so to speak. And in behavioral economy, together with some colleagues of the department of the university where I work, I had the opportunity to really appreciate the value of care, of how much real relationships can create transformations, changes in people, as for instance, rehabilitation programs in some high security prisons in the United States, as well as education projects in Africa. And these are just two of so many possible examples. So when I had this opportunity, I was really happy to coordinate, to manage together with the Giorgiani this village work and care. Over the past 2 years, together with the many young people who participated at different levels, we tried to actually pose some questions rather than provide answers, because this is a very difficult issue. And we have been moving towards 3 different directions. Work is something that is part of everyone's life. It is a dimension that is essential in everybody's life, because we need to work in order to be able to afford our everyday life. But it's also important for our personal dignity. But often, if someone, for any reason, for any kind of issues and problems, is defined by his or her work, well, they lose sight of all the other aspects of their lives. So everything that can be described as care for family members, care for the environment, care for those who live with us. So we tried to work together with some experts, international experts, as for instance Professor Jennifer Andeschi. We tried to understand how in today's economy we can reconcile working times, which are more and more demanding for every one of us, with the time of care for our family and our loved ones. So we have to look at this from the point of view of enterprises. We wanted to work with many enterprises of the Italian business world in order to see whether it was possible to do something. So thanks to these interventions, and particularly to this dialogue with enterprises, we managed to develop a second area of study, so to speak, in order to understand whether this flexibility, which is extremely important in our modern world of which is ever-changing, it can be a value and cannot lead to uncertainty, because uncertainty means to be deprived of care opportunities. Let's think about young people. If you do not have a job that is stable, you cannot actually decide to create a family, for instance. So then there is a third aspect, a third dimension, because, well, the economy of France is a call by the Pope, but also by Saint Francis, who said that work is a grace, and it is actually a gift from God. So we need to safeguard it, to promote it, and to protect it, because it is part of the great plan of God. So this actually is a part, is a natural element of the social doctrine of the Church, which since Rerum Novarum has always focused on the theme of work, and therefore what we tried to do was to understand from the wisdom of the Church how to put the dignity of individuals the very center, the very heart of what we do. And this can actually be the beginning of a new humanism. And this is the basis of the question we have been asking ourselves. What can we do today? What can Economy of Francis do to contribute to this new humanism, to bring about this new perspective in a dynamic and ever-changing economic system? Thank you, Domenico, and I would like to thank you also on behalf of all the young people who have been working with you, with Giacomo, in these villages, because this is really the right place. The Courage to Say Hi is the right title, so to speak, because today within the Church, we talk about we, about us, but there is no us if there is no me. So, well, the only us that works is when us is the result of many different me's. Without that, there wouldn't be any Economy of Francis. So you probably remember the masks we used at the beginning of the work of Economy of Francis, in order to say we don't want to put a mask on, we wanted to work as individuals. So I have now well, to answer this question, as you know, this process is ongoing on October the 2nd in Assisi. There will be the second international moment, which will be a hybrid event. The different countries will be present, if possible, but there will also be a 3-hour streaming, so that we will have this moment together with the Pope from Assisi. So we need creativity, we need ideas, we need competencies and know-how. And you were talking about St. Francis, what he said about work. We sometimes forget that St. Francis talked in his the last book he wrote. He said that he wanted for his friend to work. They had to work. So this is a mention that in a way, well, got lost. But St. Francis didn't want their work to be paid. They didn't want to touch money. That doesn't mean that he didn't see the value of the work, but on the contrary, it was seen as something that couldn't be paid with money. And so he had this kind of intuition, according to scholars. If you start working in order to be paid, then money becomes the reason why you work. And this is in a way some kind of prophecy that cannot be extended to everyone in the world, but your salary, your income is much more than you think it is. Beyond those 2,000-3,000 euros, there is something which is not seen, but it is something bigger. That is, you say, your life. something that cannot be measured with money. So your salary is just the tip of the iceberg, actually. So if we go back to Jesus, and I'm working on the Gospel by St. Mark, and well, here everybody has their own expertise. Saint Catherine from Siena, and well, I have St. Mark. The first 5 people Jesus calls are working people, 4 fishermen and a republican whose work was considered to be unclean because he touched money, touched the coins with the images, which was not accepted by the Jewish at the time. And the idea at the time was that if you actually work with money, you can be corrupted. So, well, anyway, what really strikes me is that Jesus calls working people, and he calls them while they're working. For us, economists and Christians, to see that the first people Jesus calls are people working, not working in a synagogue, but rather working with their fishing nets, for instance. Well, that means that work is something spiritual. There's nothing more spiritual, nowhere more spiritual where you can be called by the voice of God. So this really gives a great spirituality to men's work. You don't have to stop working and go to the church in order to hear God's call. And Jesus calls working people probably because he needs some know-how, so to speak. He says you are going to be fishing men, human beings. The same skills you apply to your work as fishermen, you have to start using the same expertise in your work as followers of Jesus. So, well, we need people who are excellent professionals, who have an expertise. And so this is really a basic starting point that is really fundamental. So when I read this part of St. Mark Gospel, I really realize how much work is important in the economy of our lives. And now let's move to the field of finance. So you said that us, the only form of us that works is that the one that is made of many different eyes, or me's. So, well, many students that start working in the banking world, in the entrepreneurial world, well, these are places that do not actually encourage the change Pope Francis is advocating. So, well, we invited Chiara Campagnere, who works in an investing bank in a, so to speak, hostile environment, so that she can actually tell us what was her experience over the past year, and how she could actually have the courage to be an eye in an investment bank. And as soon as I came to know about economy of Francis, I was really enthusiastic because I really wanted to find a way to bring finances to something that has to do with the real economy. And this made it possible for me to meet many people all around the world. And it was really interesting for me to see that there are so many young people who share my doubts and my fears. So this first contact with these people really helped me. And particularly, there are 4 young people working in the financial world. We created a small community, so to speak, and where we talk about the themes that are more linked with our sector, and to share our experiences, our everyday experiences. And the dialogue with these four young people was marked by the words of the Pope. And he says, if you can do something in your work, in your universities, enterprises, public and private offices, with intelligence and with a will, in order to reach the core where decisions are made and the future is generated, you need to be involved, otherwise you will miss history. So this is really a provocative statement in order to understand that, for instance, finances is a very controversial world, because if it is done correctly, it can be a very powerful development tool and can have very positive spin-offs on the real economy. But at the same time, it is an area that is dominated by logics that are dictated by individualism. So, well, we can say that lately many steps forward were made in order to make profit more sustainable. New European directives and rules were issued, so there are important changes that actually give a new impetus to the financial world. But as Giacomo was saying, this is a system that sometimes is very difficult to improve because of its general roots, the general way in which it is seen. So sometimes you feel discouraged. Young people are discouraged because it's not easy to bring about this kind of change. So I'm wondering, what are the chances for new generations in order to avoid becoming just a clock in the machine, and to become, as the Pope used to say, really the heart of decision making in a world that is more and more complex. Thank you, Chiara. Well, first of all, from my point of view, at least, I don't know what the Pope thinks about this. Well, we know what his position is, but the Pope doesn't really have financial knowledge. Remembers his father, who was an accountant, and he went out in the morning and came back tired in the evening. And so, well, he has some kind of message. We are all conditioned by the experiences of our childhood. So this was the Pope's experience as a child, and this is an important element. So when the Pope thinks about the financial world, it is often in a negative way. It is true that this is a world that has some important issues. Let's think about the crisis in 2008. But as what I would like to say, don't be afraid. We need to understand that there are human areas that are only devoted to sins. Good and evil are interwoven everywhere, and well, the financial world is one of these examples, but you cannot have a better world with a better financial activities. You cannot think about a world without financial activities. Let's think about the Franciscans who created the first popular banks, and for instance, in the region of central Italy, they founded well, hundreds of banks in order to combat any kind of different credit, and this is a very fundamental right. This is something we cannot forget. So we cannot today think about a world where there is no financial activity. We cannot think to go back to the Middle Ages. We cannot think to go back to the world before these popular banks. So we need to understand that we need to humanize the economy, humanize finance. And well, this can be done only if we think about what happened over the past few years. And seeing that this is an area that is not really noble because we made it not noble with so many negative things we said, and it has been abandoned by the best people who decided to do something different. So the best human beings were no longer working in the field of finance, and the finance became the subject of speculators. So if young people do not start to work in the world of finance, that will become really the reign of investment funds and nothing more. There is nothing left, so nothing else we can do. If we step back from difficult places, these places will be left to people who are not bad people, but who have different goals. So this is my message, my appeal to young people, because there are so many clever young people, full of enthusiasm. And well, Domenico is young, but he has 5 children, so this is why he talks about care, work and care. He works a lot and well, also provides a lot of care. So, well, these young people, up to 35 years of age, needed to go to the difficult places of economy. Yes, it is all nice and easy to go and work in non-profit realities, but let's go to investment funds, and let's try to bring about our struggle there. There is no common good without finance. So this is something we need to remember. We cannot escape finance. We need to live finance. Thank you. And I'd say that this moving from a personal experience and the themes that we have actually worked with is actually working. So let's go back to another kind of experience, that of Paolo, a theme that, well, it is clear to all of us, is that of make this work become more fruitful, and well, without losing what we have done up to now. And well, this is actually something that we have to bear in mind. So, well, from a different point of view, there is a risk. There is the risk that many young people that are maybe fascinated by the call of the Pope, as we were fascinated by the Pope's call, and we have been given a responsibility by the Pope. Over time, they lose their enthusiasm, and often there is the risk that the economy of Francis can become an ideology. We invited Paolo here for him to tell us about his experience. So he's a financial analyst and other representative of the banking world. So you have the word, Paolo, and thank you for your time.
Thanks to you. My name is Paolo Grignani. I work as a financial analyst, and specifically I deal with macroeconomics in emerging and developing countries. So the topics that the economy of Francis addresses are not new to me, because every day I deal with issues related to the debt of poor people to rich countries. And I started this work 5 years ago, and actually this was accompanied by a question: what can I do to face these issues, and what can I do to face these problems without being overwhelmed by them and without having the pretension to solve them? So when the call of the Pope came to relaunch the new economy. That is the reason why I I immediately said yes to this call, thanks to the Foundation for Subsidiarity. I was struck by the method proposed by the Pope, which is that of, he asked us to put ourselves at stake directly in the workplace, because the workplace is what he calls the building sites of hope. And then another part of the working method is that of rejecting the economy imposed by above, because the time has come to reject models of sustainability and development in which people, especially those who are excluded, stop being functional because they have to become protagonists of their own life. We have to think with them and not for them. We have to be skeptical towards the ideas of enlightenment, because everything has to be done with the people. So the event of last October closed with the drafting of a manifesto with 12 varied requests, ranging from the reform of international institutions to technologies. So I am aware of the fact that this manifesto does not cover the entire depth of the event. But the risk that the Pope has highlighted is that we might address only the issues indicated by this document, and that we limit ourselves to follow these indications and not embrace a holistic approach. So my question is actually the following. What's the big novelty of the economy of Francis? How can this be a proposal which is alive, that does not limit itself to the attainment of certain goals? And what can we do in terms of we as young people? Very interesting question. Thank you very much. And also the warning that you have raised in terms of these precautions for use of the message given by the Pope. This is basically the risk of any ideology and ideals. When you abandon reality, when you pursue projects that are no longer related with tangible things, with people, for example, they may be interesting, they may be fascinating, they may bring about lots of knowledge, but they are detached from poor people. And that means that you are already very much into the ideology. Just think of the 20th century, and also think of the church. All movements that stemmed within the Catholic Church have always had to fight between ideals and ideology. And this will probably apply to this reality as well. So what's the antidote? What's the vaccine? This is a very complicated word. What's the vaccine for ideology? The vaccine is actually to be in close contact with young people. We have not to lose sight of poor people, of the families, of those who struggle to make ends meet. For example, people who find it really difficult to sustain their families. Poverty is not only a disgrace. Poverty is a word of the gospel. The gospel used to say, be the poor people blessed. Poverty is also some kind of a spiritual and ethical gene of life. If you are still in touch with poverty, you remain human. If you create a life in which you no longer see peripheries, then it's difficult. For example, a friend of mine once told me, actually, we would like to do something for poor people, but we no longer see the poor people. So my question was, well, actually, I doubt that you no longer have poor people, especially because you live in a protected world. That is because the earth that gives you, it's like the myth of Hercules and Antio. So Hercules was not capable of killing Antheus. He would bring him to the ground, and actually, Antheo was the son of the earth. So if we if you remain strong thanks to the earth, we do not become ideological. While if we detach ourselves from the ground, from the earth, actually, we run the risk of falling into ideology. Then this issue of the fact that you have lots of people who come and go, who have started this venture and then have stopped. That is something that is very much part of ideology. That's part of ideology. People exit a certain movement only at high costs. Actually, I like to think of Francis as the word of the movement of John the Baptist. There is a movement. For example, Jesus started as so to say, a disciple of the Baptist, but there was a movement without structures, without belonging. People would be prepare themselves, they would be baptized, they would spend some months there as novices. There were probably tests in the desert as a part of a pathway for a new life. Then they would be free from their conviction, and they would then come back home and carry on with their lives. So that was a movement with a very ideal reference. That was some kind of a mobile tent. It was not a fixed building. So I believe that the 20th century created lots of buildings in which you could enter. You could enter a reality in a very strong way. And then that liquid society, however, has changed. Everybody has to be free to get in and get out of that, especially young people, because 2 years and a half for a young person is a life. The very fact that a young person 2 years ago actually started a pathway is perfect, because that means that 2 years of his life, that young person has carried out a fundamental experience in his life. In 2 years and a half, a young person can do lots of things. So we need to know that realities like this, which are not structured, which are tense, will always be characterized by lots of people coming and going. So people coming out and coming out, but also the new people, new young people get in, like here. So you have people who want to be committed, they come, they apply to us, and whenever you have a young person joining the economy of Francis, well, that economy of Francis changes. So we need to increase, to, in a way, enhance this movement, because a movement is lively, especially if it sets people in the situation in which they can get in and out. I believe that any community can be measured by the ability it has of creating people who are so free they can leave that movement. If you, as a movement, do not produce people who are so autonomous that they can live it, that's a community of slaves. It is as if you have a cage, you open the door of the cage and the bird stays in. But if you have a mature community which is ethically free, that creates people who are ethically free to leave. They don't do it, but they might do it. They have the chance to do it. That is why a beautiful community is always on the verge of its disappearance, because if it controls its members, it controls cages. But if it does not control them, they can leave. So ours is a very large community. We have the Pope and we have Saint Francis. And because we're dealing with these two personalities, actually, people know that they can live whenever they want. They feel that they are free. They are dealing with Francis and Pope Francis and Saint Francis. So the center and the periphery, and everybody knows that they depend. Each and any one of them depends on the other. And so I wish that in the next few years, this capacity, these dynamics, this incoming and outgoing flows are always happy of making their experience, leaving, maybe drinking a glass of water, and then continue with their own life. If it is like that, then we grow well. But if we start, for example, doing memberships or hierarchical levels in a couple of months, everything will end. So we are sentinels. We are the sentinels of this property and non-private property of reality, in which actually we should have a common good that is treated as such. Thank you very much. This is a major warning. This is a responsibility we have. So we have just a few minutes left to pose the last question. I would like to remember this issue of belonging, of the I and the us, that the Pope reminded us. The Pope said it will not be possible to commit in big things only from a theoretical perspective, without a spirit animating itself, without internal motivations giving sense, without belonging, and without a deep rooting that, in a way, give breath to the community and to individual action. And I believe that the Rimini meeting has fully embraced this suggestion by the meeting. So, Luigino, by way of conclusion, I would like to ask you what you think that we can expect for the near future and also for the future that is not so near. Well, actually, I expect everything and nothing. I expect life to go on. I expect this something that is so wonderful that put in place without any facilities, without lots of money, with few people. I really hope that this continues. Simply because it was created with the strength of a message, that it continues to be alive, because life is much larger. So we have to set ourselves small objectives. On the 28th, we have this march in favor of African women. That's wonderful. I mean, the very same organization of that moment is already sufficient, is already enough. And then the fact that the very fact that it is a lively moment, because a small life can be seen from far away if it is alive. So I will do my part to keep it alive, but then it's up to you. I mean, that is a reality made up of young people. It is not intergenerational. It is made up of young people. Like I said before, adults are like the adults who witness those who participate in the celebration for the 18th birthday of their children. They just witness. But then if they also start playing the guitar and singing Lucio Battisti, then their children go away. So we have to avoid that. We have to, in a way, start playing the songs of the 1970s to pretend that we are as young as you are. Because the party is the party of the young people. It is the young people who have to have fun. So creativity, that's already there. So you have to go on like that. Whenever I read something, whenever I get an email, there was a girl from Iraq who wrote and she shot a video on peace. So that's my personal satisfaction. The fact that I have said yes to the Pope. Actually, it's very difficult to say no to the Pope. You can do it, of course. We're free. We're not slaves. But it's also wonderful to say yes. And I say yes to the Pope every day. Actually, this is not my work, actually. I do something else in life. I'm doing this just for free. But I think this is very much right, so because we have to spend our times and money for young people. So the 2nd of October is a very important moment. You have to feel it. You have to spread the message. This is a movement that has to be kept alive. And so we have to keep it alive. We have to participate and see what happens. If this Pope is supported with this economy of Francis for 6 or 7 years, that will be certainly a fantastic thing. And then we'll see. I mean, we're not the directors, we're not the leaders, we're just supporters. We're those who actually support us in a lively moment. So we have to have life flow and see what happens. So that's also a very nice wish. We are in perfect timing. I really hope that this meeting has, in a way, raised your interest towards this ongoing process. We've already heard so many interesting stories and we'll listen to many more. So let's meet in Assisi on the 2nd of October next. There will be 3 hours in streaming. and you can follow it from home because that's going to be streamed. And then last but not least, I would like to remind you all that the Rimini meeting is a free event. It starts from a sense of belonging. And when we belong to something, we are grateful. So you can do it in the various stands. You see there are lots of stands with the red heart and the dove inside. You can contribute to organize also the next edition of the Rimini meeting. Thank you very much for participating, and I wish you fruitful proceedings. Thank you, and thanks to Chiara and Paolo as well.
Thank you.